I'm Lee Klarich, Chief Product Officer at Palo Alto Networks. Thank you all so much for joining us on the SASE event. We have a lot planned to share with you, incredible product launch, insights from industry luminaries, and I thought it'd be really good to start with just stepping back and saying, why are we here? Why are we talking about SASE? You know, even before COVID, cloud adoption was skyrocketing. Hybrid work was clearly going to play a key role in how enterprises got the job done. Obviously, both of those were accelerated over the last few years. And as that has happened, it has driven this need for a rethink of the overall enterprise network architecture, and in particular, this idea of a more direct-to-app experience where users working from anywhere, connecting to applications located anywhere. Now, to do that, it really means everywhere. On-prem, off-prem, branch, traveling, et cetera. And so organizations need a consistent and scalable way to provide secure connectivity everywhere, right? So how does this sort of manifest itself? Well, what I just described is sort of more of the end state. And what often happens, at least what I see, is SASE is something that ends up kind of happening through a set of incremental projects, right? It might start that you say, look, we need a better remote access solution. All right, let's go look for one of those. Or we need to rethink our private app access, AKA ZTNA. We need to think about, how we secure access to SaaS applications. And you might think about, CASB for that, or how you do web security for internet bound. And so starting at one of these sort of individual projects and saying, all right, what are we going to do for this project? And then maybe 6 months or 12 months later, there's another project, and then another project. Well, the challenge with that is you can very quickly end up in this highly fragmented approach to SASE, which is not that original picture I painted of this consistent experience, consistent solution. And so this fragmented approach, what happens is it causes a lot of challenges. First and foremost, if you go back to why are we even doing SASE in the first place, this is about user productivity. How do we enhance the productivity of all employees? Well, that means we have to deliver an amazing user experience. Well, it's really hard to deliver an amazing user experience if they get a different experience for every different thing they're trying to do. Second, from a security perspective, it causes a lot of challenges, right? Because you think about if you had a different solution for each different use case within SASE, well, you're going to get a different security outcome, right? And in some cases, that security outcome might not be the most optimal one. And you're certainly going to face challenge of how you have consistency and lack of gaps in the security architecture if these are all different solutions that are not working together, right? And then certainly from a complexity perspective, right? What all of you have to do, the operational side, is going to be different. The manual nature, the trying to replicate what you did in one area to another area and having to do all of that manually, and just all of that is going to be highly error prone. And again, lead potentially to security challenges, leading to potential user experience challenges. So the way I think about this is SASE requires a unified approach. If we're to really achieve this incredible outcome that is possible, this direct-to-app experience, this amazing user productivity and user experience, improved security outcomes, right? There's a reason that SASE was envisioned as an integrated architecture. And that's not just our view. That is the view of many of the people in the industry who were on the forefront of thinking about SASE as a future way of delivering security. So the only way to deliver this consistent, scalable, resilient, secure connectivity platform is through a highly integrated approach. And that is what we have done with Prisma SASE. What I believe is the industry's most complete and integrated SASE solution. So as you can see in this slide, what our approach allows us to do is take these different sort of project-based requirements and make those use cases within a single platform. So you can adopt our Prisma SASE solution one use case at a time, but each incremental use case is building on the one that came before and is building toward a comprehensive and natively integrated SASE outcome. Now, this requires having the right architectural approach. And the right architectural approach required that we made choices when we very first were thinking about our SASE solution and how to build it and how to architect it, because we had to architect it from the ground up to be able to support all of these different use cases through one platform. Right? We are able to uniquely combine this scalable architecture. We're able to leverage multiple hyperscaler environments, both for their compute locations as well as their global network connectivity in order to deliver this amazing scalable architecture. We're able to tightly integrate our threat intelligence and AI-based capabilities from a security perspective. And we're able to ensure consistent and easy management across these different use cases, right? Single policy structure for users regardless of where they're coming from and regardless of where they're going to. Now, if I think about some of the key capabilities that we need to be able to deliver from this platform in order to truly realize this vision, it's going to be AI-powered. Now, I realize, as much as all of you probably do, that AI has very quickly in the last few months become this buzzword that you're probably hearing nonstop. We started thinking about AI over 10 years ago and how we could use AI in our security services to stay a step ahead of attackers. How we could use AI to detect attacks that we had never seen before. And how we could use that inline such that we're not only detecting these attacks, but we are able to prevent the attack as well, because that detection, the AI capability, is built inline and actively preventing even zero-day attacks. And make no mistake, there is a high probability that attackers are also starting to use AI to build more effective and targeted attacks. The only way to stay ahead of that is for us to leverage AI and stay at the forefront of our ability to detect new attacks that have never been seen before. Let me give you an example of how our AI capabilities are applied to your security. In a typical day, we will analyze about 3.5 billion new and unique events from across our network security products. And based on that, we will apply AI models to that data in order to detect over 275,000 new and unique attacks that we had never seen before. We add that to the list of everything else that we've seen before, and based on that knowledge of attacks, we are able to block nearly 5 billion attacks every single day. That is the power of AI applied to security. And we're just getting started. We've recently made announcements around how we are leveraging AI to also change the operational side of SASE. How we're able to use AI applied to operational data, ADEM data, which is the user information, in order to better understand the operational state of our SASE solution, how we're able to understand and detect potential issues, and even use AI-based automation to remediate those issues before anyone even sees that there's an issue. And if it happens to be something that's not within our control, being able to signal to the user if it's within the user's network, or an administrator if it's within your control, all of which to deliver the most reliable SASE solution. So using AI to secure, using AI to operate, and doing that across the industry's most comprehensive SASE solution. Kumar will tell you more about all of that in a little bit. But before we get to Kumar, I have a very special guest with me that I'd like to introduce you to. All right, so we're joined by David Holmes. David, you're a senior analyst at Forrester Research, and you cover Zero Trust, SASE, security. First of all, thank you so much for joining us. Would you maybe mind sharing a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. I'm David Holmes. I'm an analyst at Forrester. As Lee mentioned, I've been covering SASE for a few years now. I've been covering network security, and I have a background in network security.
Now, you talk to a lot of companies about SASE.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, like, just what are some of your main takeaways from those conversations? What are you hearing from your clients, and maybe a little bit about what you're telling them in the realm of SASE?
Sure. So if you don't mind me backing up a couple years, this started right before the pandemic, right? I was even getting some questions about people asking about this model. What is the way to do cybersecurity architecture in the future? But then it really, really developed during the pandemic. Because of my background in network security, I was the analyst that everybody called when their VPNs weren't working, right? When they're having licensing issues, a lot of performance problems. And I would try to tell everybody the way out of this isn't more VPNs. The way out of this is zero trust and a new architecture called SASE, or we call it a zero trust edge at Forrester, but it's the same model. And initially, people didn't want to hear that, right? Their hair was on fire, and they didn't want me to tell them about the haircut of the future. They just wanted a bucket of water to pour on their head. But eventually, it started to get into people saying, "Oh, okay, I can get my productivity back with zero trust, ZTNA, replace my VPNs, and then what?" And then that would start developing into the conversation of, here are other security services you can consume as a service. So I would say that over time, the conversation started out very educational. What is this thing I'm hearing about? And then they were very tactical. How do I solve a very specific problem? And now they're more, say, strategic. We want to be ready for the future. We want to modernize. Does that help?
No. Yes. And the COVID was not a gradual transition. This was something that happened like over a weekend for a lot of companies.
Right. Yes.
I am curious in the context of how you talk about zero trust, or like zero trust to me is a much bigger concept than ZTNA.
Of course.
Right. And so I'm guessing that most companies were not able to implement an enterprise-wide zero trust architecture overnight. How have you seen customers sort of evolve their thinking and sort of evolve it into a much bigger solution?
Sure. So that's a great point, and you're right. People were not ready to just do the whole thing right there. They're all remote. They're still struggling to figure out, how do we work, right? Now that those times are over and the government mandates have come out saying everyone should do zero trust, there's a lot more clients coming to me asking, okay, let's back up. What should we have done before we did ZTNA? And we have those conversations all the time. And I just released a report on how can somebody get to, say, an intermediate state, a credible intermediate state of zero trust. But the conversations, once they go from very tactical to more strategic, they either go in one of two directions. One is, I want to do a full zero trust program, or they say, I want to do the architecture of the future. And in both of these cases, there's sort of like a security ideology. There's just one now, right? It's zero trust. And in the architecture of the future, there's just one now, and it's SASE. And so these conversations, they go one or the other way, and I'm happy to walk with them on that journey. I try not to mix them up too much because they're both big topics.
Right. At least my memory of like where I first started hearing about SASE, and as we first started thinking about SASE, we thought of it as a fairly comprehensive solution. Yet, what I often have seen is these sort of different use cases of SASE being broken up into different projects. What advice do you give clients when they are trying to respond to a project-based need in the context of SASE?
I tried to assist them on their path, meet them where they're going. Does that make sense? Similarly to Zero Trust, I suppose one could say, take a step back and do some of the homework first. I don't typically do that. I know what it's like. They're under a deadline. They have budgetary considerations. This license is going to expire. They're trying to do this. So I'll meet them where they're going. But I would agree that a lot of people are sort of backing into SASE by doing a tactical project, like I'm going to replace my SD-WAN, or I'm going to replace my MPLS, and that's part of it. Or much more commonly, I'm going to adopt ZTNA to support the remote workforce. And so in both of these cases, you see how they sort of backing their way into this model, which is, to be honest, suboptimal, right? It would be better if they were to look at the whole thing strategically and then pick the solution or the vendor or the ecosystem that's going to work best for the long term. But a lot of people don't operate that way.
Part of the reason I ask is, in sort of my observation is one of the key benefits that SASE could potentially bring is a much more integrated set of capabilities. And if you back into it on a project by project basis, you might not end up in that state.
Right.
So is that aligned with how you think about SASE and where the ideal outcome would be?
So I'll speak frankly. Like, the question that comes up all the time is this a single vendor thing, right? I believe it is, not because I want to promote any particular vendor, but just the mechanics of how everything works. So for example, if you have the pair of technologies we call SWG, Secure Web Gateway, and CASB, right? These developed at different times in our history. So they came from different companies and they're deployed in different ways, but there's absolutely no reason why they should be separate in my mind, right? They're kind of doing the same thing. One's looking at packets going out to the unknown internet versus the known internet. Having different vendors for that, wildly inefficient. And if something went wrong, if you had the software for both on each laptop, think of how just complicated and all the political strings you'd have to pull. If something went wrong, you know that the two solutions would blame each other. Or if this stuff is in the cloud together, how tightly would they have to be? And there'll be some people who say, oh, with APIs these days, it could all work. I'm a skeptic. I think people are going to want one throat to choke, and there's going to be a lot of consolidation. And in the end, I think there'll just be a handful of vendors who do this, and you will choose one, and they will be the ones who handle your networking and your security.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
Palo Alto Networks. Yes, I think that makes sense. When you think about SASE, who's to say this isn't a passing fad?
Good one. So part of my job, besides predicting the future, is trying to figure out what is a fad and what is real. And so I've been an analyst for almost 4 years now, and I get briefed by hundreds of companies a year, like any interesting startup, anybody in the zero trust space, anything to do with network security. Over these almost 4 years, I've only seen 2 things that I thought were truly transformative, disruptive, and could change the way we do everything. And the model called SASE is one of those things. And I think one of the reasons it's so disruptive is it has the capacity to solve multiple problems at once, right? But the main problem it would solve from a security perspective is I was around when the internet first became sort of escaped from the universities and people started getting on it. And if you talk to some of the old timers who designed it, they said, we never designed it for every human on the planet. This was just for us professors to talk to each other. So it had no security built into it. And so many of the things we've been doing since then have been just putting larger and larger band-aids on this initial problem. One of the core reason I like this model is we don't just have your average business owner anymore. We don't just, in this model, we don't just tell them, okay, hook up to this super toxic internet and you're on your own. Like if something happens, the police aren't going to get involved. There's no cyber cops. To me, that I was never comfortable with that. In this model, at least, there's a sort of a trusted third party who is going to amortize their security people, maybe use their machine learning in service of protecting that person. So there used to be this ancient phrase like a safer on-ramp to the internet. That's the, from a security perspective, that's the thing that's going to transform it.
Yeah. One more question that I have heard that when I answer it, I may sound biased, but perhaps if you were to answer it, it would be better. Does SASE replace the firewall?
In some cases, yes. So I have talked to early adopters who've gone in on this model, and they've replaced their MPLS, they replaced their SD-WAN, they replaced their VPN, they replaced their firewall, and they went all in on this. Right? And that's when I said it solves multiple problems at once. But on the flip side of that, so we're a research firm, right? Forrester Research. And we put out a survey every year to security decision makers. And one of the questions we ask is, how many of your apps have moved to the cloud? And 2 years ago, it was like 42% of the apps had moved. And then I think the last time we looked at it, it was 45%, right? I think it's just gonna level off at about 50%. And the apps that were easy to move or that were going to move would have moved. And the ones that needed to stay on-prem are going to stay. And there's a lot of reasons for that, right? We could talk for hours about all the apps that are going to stay. But if it levels off at 50%, right, that ultimately means that everyone has to support both of these environments. And if you have on-prem, you will probably need firewalls to protect the on-prem space. Like I think the security in the cloud might be different, but I don't necessarily cover that space. But certainly on the on-prem, there's going to be that. Now also, the Global 2000 they'll always have on-prem, right? You could probably count on one hand the Global 2000 companies that are purely digital with no actual properties. And those are the ones that are very ripe to get taken over or merged with one of the existing Global 2000s, right? So just to talk about, say, the firewall market, because I also cover that market. A lot of the vendors are at least defensively marketing a SASE solution that may or may not exist. But one of the things I appreciate in cases such as yourselves is that there appears to be significant investment in realizing that this model is going to be real and that both of these markets still exist.
Yes, and for what it's worth, I believe strongly that SASE is an amazing opportunity for transforming how security is delivered. I do believe, like you said, that for large enterprises, for sure, it will be ultimately hybrid. There will still be large campus environments. There will still be data centers. There will still be on-premise applications, and so the important part becomes how do we create a model where there is a strong relationship and consistency across
absolutely
the different ways the security is delivered.
Right.
Yeah. Well, David, thank you very much for joining me today.
It was a pleasure.
Really appreciate your insights and sharing it with all of our customers and helping them with what is both I think a very critical decision that many of them are making, as well as one that can sometimes be complex. So thank you.